Every year, millions of us dress up as monsters, carve smiling pumpkins, and beg strangers for candy, and we call it Halloween. But this holiday wasn't always about costumes or candy. It was once a sacred night, rooted in fear, fire, and the belief that the boundary between life and death could be crossed. Today we'll uncover how an ancient Celtic festival of spirits became one of the most beloved, commercial, and spooky holidays in the world. This is the real history of Halloween. Our story begins more than 2,000 years ago with the Celts, who lived across modern-day Ireland, Scotland, and parts of France. For them, the year was divided by the harvest, and October 31st marked the festival of Samhain, meaning summer's end. Samhain wasn't just a seasonal change, it was a spiritual threshold. The Celts believed that on this night, the veil between the world of the living and the dead was at its thinnest. Spirits could cross over, the dead could return home. And creatures from the other world, fae, demons, or gods, might wander the land. To protect themselves, the Celts lit enormous bonfires, believed to have cleansing power, and wore animal skins and masks to confuse or scare away spirits. They also left out food for wandering souls, a peace offering to keep the dead from causing harm. It was a night of fear and reverence, of endings and beginnings. The first Halloween wasn't about candy, it was about survival. Centuries later, the Roman Empire conquered Celtic lands, and with it came Roman festivals like Feralia, which honored the dead, and Pomona, celebrating the goddess of fruit and harvest. These merged with Samhain, blending pagan fire with Roman ritual. That's why apples, a symbol of Pomona, became part of Halloween lore. Yes, even apple bobbing dates back to ancient Rome. But the biggest change came when Christianity swept across Europe. The church, wary of pagan celebrations, tried to replace them rather than erase them. In the 7th century, Pope Boniface IV established All Saints' Day on November 1st, also called All Hallows' Day, to honor saints and martyrs. The night before became All Hallows' Eve, which eventually slurred into Halloween.
All Hallows' Eve has become a night of frolic, where children wear costumes and run amok.
Amok! Amok, 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 amok. Oh, really, just one child.
Despite the church's efforts, people kept their old traditions, the bonfires, the costumes, the fears of roaming spirits. Halloween became a strange mix of Christian observance and pagan superstition, where prayers for souls were whispered alongside old Celtic rituals. By the Middle Ages, these beliefs evolved into new customs. One of the earliest forms of trick-or-treating began, but it looked very different. On All Hallows' Eve, poor villagers and children went door-to-door souling. They offered prayers for the dead in exchange for soul cakes, small sweetbreads marked with a cross. Each cake eaten was said to free a soul from purgatory. It was charity, faith, and tradition rolled into one. Homeowners would hand out food not to avoid tricks, but to earn blessings for loved ones who had passed. Over time, the religious meaning faded, and a bit of mischief crept in. Young people began dressing up as ghosts, devils, or saints, a practice known as guising. They performed songs or jokes for food and ale. Meanwhile, people started carving grotesque faces into turnips and beets, placing candles inside to scare off evil spirits. This practice came from the Irish legend of Stingy Jack, a trickster who outwitted the devil and was cursed to roam the earth with only a hollowed-out turnip lantern. That jack-o'-lantern would later become the pumpkin we know today. Halloween arrived in North America with Irish and Scottish immigrants in the 1800s, but at first it didn't catch on, especially in Puritan New England, where anything remotely pagan was considered sinful. Still, in more Catholic communities and rural towns, old customs persisted: parties, ghost stories, fortune-telling, and harvest celebrations. By the mid-1800s, a huge wave of Irish immigrants fleeing the potato famine brought Halloween firmly to the United States. They carried with them guising, pranks, and the story of Stingy Jack. In America, people swapped turnips for pumpkins, a native crop that was bigger, easier to carve, and, frankly, looked better glowing on a porch. But trick-or-treating? That came later. The modern idea of trick-or-treating didn't emerge until the early 20th century, and it evolved from a mix of European customs and American mischief. During the late 1800s, Halloween became known as a night of chaos. Kids vandalized property, stole gates, and played pranks that sometimes got dangerous. Cities needed a way to channel that energy, to make the holiday safer and more family-friendly. So, in the 1920s and 1930s, community groups, churches, and schools started organizing neighborhood parties and door-to-door events where kids could visit houses for treats instead of causing trouble. The message was simple: if you give us candy, we won't prank you. Hence, trick or treat. The phrase first appeared in print in 1927 in an Alberta newspaper describing costumed children going house to house demanding sweets. After World War II, sugar rationing ended, candy companies saw their chance, and Halloween exploded. By the 1950s, the practice was nationwide. Candy makers like Hershey's and Mars began marketing small, individually wrapped treats just for Halloween. What started as a Celtic ritual to ward off the dead had become a corporate holiday built around chocolate. By the late 20th century, Halloween was unrecognizable from its roots. It became a cultural phenomenon, blending ancient symbolism with pop culture. Horror films like Halloween, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th turned October into the season of fear. Haunted houses, costumes, and horror marathons became annual traditions. Today, Halloween generates over $10 billion in revenue annually in the US alone, making it second only to Christmas in consumer spending. And yet, at its core, the same ancient ideas still linger. The fear of death, the thrill of disguise, the comfort of light and darkness. Halloween has always been about transformation. Once it was the night when the dead walked the earth. Now it's the night when we become whoever or whatever we want to be. From the fires of Samhain to the flicker of a jack-o'-lantern, humanity's fascination with death, disguise, and the supernatural never really truly died. It just changed costumes. So next time you carve that pumpkin or hand out candy to kids in plastic masks, remember, you're taking part in a ritual thousands of years old, one that survived religion, empire, and commercialization, because it speaks to something timeless in us all, the need to honor the dark before the light returns. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the origins of Halloween, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me your favorite Halloween tradition, or which part of this story surprised you the most.